Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for July 31st, the last day of July 2026. It is the last day of July, and we are now starting to head into the peak months of the hurricane season in the Atlantic. And with that being said, as we enter the month of August, we actually do have some potential signals that the models are beginning to hint at some signs of life as things progress with the Atlantic hurricane season, and certainly the activity might indeed reflect that. I'll go over what the models are showing and, of course, what to expect in general throughout the tropics over the next week. So with that being said, let's get started by taking a look at the tropical weather bulletin right now from the National Hurricane Center. Nothing highlighted just yet over the next 7 days, but if there is any place that I think will be highlighted soon enough, given the model trends over the last day or so, might be off the southeast coast here, as models, the AI ensembles, and especially the GFS and European operational have been showing that there would be some sort of low pressure here that might try to develop and then consolidate as it moves on off to the northeast, trying to form, at least right off the southeast coast. There's still a little bit of uncertainty, and not all of the models are on board, but there is a signal, and again, I'll show you that in a little bit, and it might keep us a little bit busy here in terms of tracking the tropics as we enter the start of August. The Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, is kind of on a downtrend right now. We have what once was Hurricane Genevieve, now Tropical Storm Genevieve, 60-mile-per-hour winds, minimum pressure of 996 millibars, and just want to show you the track here. This is going to continue to weaken and move on off to the west-northwest and probably become a remnant low system by the end of the weekend. And just in general, looking at the Eastern Pacific here, no other area highlighted by the National Hurricane Center just yet beyond Genevieve. So we might actually slip into a slumber here in the Pacific for a little bit, surprisingly, even though, you would think that this year would continue on with activity, especially given the very strong El Nino out there. And maybe that could be playing a role a little bit into the Atlantic potentially trying to wake up as we begin the month of August here. But of course, we will go over all of that throughout the course of the video. Starting off, though, with the satellite imagery and kind of taking a look at how things are looking like right now, focusing in on the Pacific, and there is, some convective activity present, especially along the intertropical convergence zone here in the Pacific, but you don't see anything trying to consolidate, and there definitely does not look like any new areas here that are bubbling up and potentially looking like new candidates for more tropical development. The main tropical entity that we do have right now here is Genevieve, and you can see that clearly, but it is moving on off to the west-northwest, and it is definitely dying. It absolutely looks like a, former core shell of itself, and I mean, that's what typically happens with these systems as they continue to move on off to the west-northwest and move into cooler sea surface temperatures like Genevieve is doing, and it doesn't look like anything else is going to follow right behind it. So things are kind of quieting down once again a little bit in the Pacific. And right now in the Atlantic, still nothing much, appearing in the immediate future, or at least right now, that is of interest. We obviously have some tropical waves out here. Clearly a tropical wave probably approaching the Eastern Caribbean right now, and as the deal typically goes, you're probably going to get some gusty winds and showers and thunderstorms, but you guys in the islands especially deal with tropical waves every few weeks, or probably every week, in every season, so nothing atypical for you. And just in general, looking at the deep tropics right now in the Eastern Atlantic, things are nice and quiet. There's nothing as well that is really bubbling and standing out that could potentially develop. And in general, throughout the Atlantic too, even off the East Coast here, a nice front which is coming down, bringing some showers and thunderstorms to Florida, and quite an active trophy pattern here in the eastern half of the United States, which is, some people say that we kind of are seeing a winter-like pattern right now set up with quite a bit of troughs, and we even had a nor'easter-like system impact the northeastern part of the United States for the last few days. But now that weather system is moving out, and conditions should be in generally nice and enjoyable for most across the eastern portion of the United States today. Um, and of course, throughout the tropics as well, things look enjoyable and nothing is threatening just yet. But again, we're going to have to watch off the southeast coast here for the next few days. And then I'll show you with the ensembles as well. They, believe it or not, some ensemble members here of certain models, believe it or not, are indicating that maybe these tropical waves here as we get into August will become a little bit more aggressive and something might try to come out of the MDR as we get into the first 2 or so weeks of August. But I'll show you that in just a little bit. And I said it before, these tropical waves and throughout the season so far, they have been coming off the coast of Africa somewhat aggressive. At times I would especially see, tropical waves that would pique my curiosity, but obviously because of atmospheric conditions in general throughout the season due to the El Nino that we have, and I'm pretty sure you all are aware of it. But of course, just general climatology, and you can see it in place right now, lots of dry air and also probably quite a bit of shear in effect throughout the Atlantic. All of these tropical waves would, fizzle out and not really amount to much. But now that we are starting to enter August and we are starting to enter a period in which climatology tends to be more on the Atlantic side in terms of getting development, and we, now we're going to start quickly ramping up a lot more climatology-wise till we get to the peak of the hurricane season, which is at the end of the month of August. You would think that some of these waves would, be a little bit more aggressive or break through, and we would at least get some development at some point. And the models, once again, are hinting at that potentially happening over the next 2 weeks. But I'll talk about that in just a second. But right now, looking at the vorticity as well, this is kind of just, adding on to the satellite imagery, showing nothing really interesting happening anywhere in the Atlantic right now. But again, with these tropical waves, that's definitely an aggressive, wave or an aggressive piece of energy here in the eastern Atlantic. And there's also some energy here off the southeast coast associated with the front here, but that is not going to develop. But we are going to have to once again watch off the southeast coast over the next few days, as we might get some sort of piece of energy, probably associated with these troughs here that are moving off the east coast and will traverse eastward in the Atlantic, and we might get one piece of energy here from one of these troughs to split off and eventually make its way back westward and try to reignite in the eastern Atlantic. But as I said before, with these waves especially here, again, you can see there's a pretty aggressive piece of energy moving off Africa and into the eastern Atlantic right now. As we get into August and as we get into a more climatologically favorable period of time for the Atlantic, you would think that one of these waves would fight back, especially fight back against the, unfavorable El Nino conditions and try to develop. We'll see whether or not that happens, and I think it's going to happen at some point. This year is obviously a super El Nino, and you would generally expect the Atlantic to be not as active as you would see in normal years. And a lot of people are saying, especially this year in particular, particularly should be shut down. But the Atlantic still produces. Even with the Super El Nino, we still get activity from time to time, and we will get activity from time to time. We cannot go a season, where there's absolutely no tropical activity whatsoever, and I don't think that's really ever happened unless we're in the Ice Age. So again, we'll have to watch and see what comes out of here with these tropical waves as they continue to get more and more aggressive, and we continue to move into a more favorable time frame for the Atlantic, typically speaking, in a hurricane season. And, even with the Super El Nino this year, again, I think things will probably gradually just generally become slightly more favorable. And, I'm saying that just out of pure logic, but then you also look at what the models have today. And not just today, this has actually been a trend we've been seeing over the last few days with quite a few of these models, but in particularly with the ensembles. This map in particular is the European AI ensembles, and you can see over the next week to 2 weeks, this goes out to 360 hours, so this is roughly 2 weeks. There are definitely some signals. One, of course, as I mentioned, off the southeast coast, and that roughly begins to appear around 7 days or so. And then looks like in the 10 to 15 day time frame, there's also a pretty decent signal here of some sort of tropical wave in the MDR too. So two distinct signals as we go into early August. And even on the Google AI ensembles as well, mainly looking at the AI ensembles, but I think if you look at the European ensembles as well, they also show, the same general ideas. And the AI ensembles too. The Google AI ensembles have both signals here. A little bit less aggressive on the MDR wave, and obviously, I did say, and I do believe we will get some activity out here, but we still have a very strong El Nino after all. So whatever does happen will still probably struggle. But especially here off the southeast coast, the Google AI ensemble actually does look a little bit interesting today. Not a lot of ensembles showing up, but the ensembles that do show up do show a particularly solid solution. And also as well, given the kind of pattern we have this year, you would think, especially off the southeast coast, is where we should watch for development, or where development would probably be favored the most in a year like this year. So the models are starting to show their signals. It's a matter of whether or not something does come to fruition, but things are definitely looking a little interesting here as we head into the early part of August. So let's go to the GFS model now. Taking a look at the operational models here. With the ensembles kind of being laid out there, and the 12Z GFS also spinning up something here off the southeast coast. In fact, they are especially aggressive with the development here off the southeast coast. That probably looks like a strong tropical storm to maybe even a hurricane that happens, and then it briskly moves on off to the northeast out to sea here, but does get very close to the Carolinas coast. So that might be an interesting threat potentially for the Carolinas if something does indeed come to fruition. And you do start to see the development origins come together roughly around 7 days out, or just under 7 days out. So this is not like this is a very long range signal that we know is obviously, a load of crud from the GFS. So we will see what happens here. The models are definitely showing signs of signals, and obviously if something does develop here, maybe the Carolinas will have to watch out. And in general, heading into early August, we start to see slow increases in tropical activity. And let's take a look at let's take a look at some other models though, besides just the GFS. And with the Euro right now on the 60 run, so it doesn't really go out beyond 6 days. But even then, you can see here in the southwestern Atlantic, there is probably the beginnings of some sort of spin up that does take place, and that does line up with what the GFS shows here, some sort of spin up getting going just off the southeast coast, and then obviously the GFS takes it off, and we end up seeing a pretty decent storm out of it. And the Euro does show something too. Oh, the European just load right now, right as I was speaking. Looks like the Euro is here after all. Nice how it literally appeared as we were recording this, and you can see the European too also showing something as well. Not as aggressive initially as the GFS shows, where the GFS shows development and intensification immediately happening here right off the southeast coast, but something still does develop and occur nonetheless, and that does actually look like a pretty decent storm as it moves out to sea on off to the northeast, which probably would be a better solution, especially in terms of talking about wanting to keep things away from the coastline here. But it is a signal nonetheless, and it is backed up by both the GFS operational and the European, and we also have some ensembles showing something here as well. So bottom line, what I'm trying to say is we will see what happens, but the models are starting to plant the seeds as we head into early August, and I think we will have to keep an eye out on things, and potentially we might have our hands full. Well, not necessarily full in terms of it being very active, but we will have our hands hands, with at least something to hold on to tropics-wise as we head into early August. And not just in terms of the general prospects of seeing development through the models, but conditions-wise off the southeast coast and in general, taking a look at sea surface temperatures across the Atlantic, but focusing in off the southeast coast too. Sea surface temperature anomalies are definitely warm. Many areas seeing at least a degree Celsius above normal, so that would definitely favor development of whatever does try to happen here. And of course, you would also expect that the subtropics and in general off the southwestern Atlantic, would probably be more favorable for development in a year like this year, given the strong El Nino, than something happening in the deep tropics. But to be fair, the eastern tropical Atlantic as well is also not doing badly, sea surface temperature anomaly-wise. And I will say we have definitely seen things here warm up quite a bit in the eastern Atlantic, especially over the last few weeks. And I probably mentioned this before, maybe in a video earlier this week, but you also are starting to get that more classic positive AMO look here with the sea surface temperatures kind of, doing a horseshoe shape coming from the northern Atlantic, stretching down off the Iberian Peninsula into the Canary Current and then southward into the eastern Atlantic here. And especially whenever we get a look like that, more oftentimes than not, that correlates with an active and sometimes very active hurricane season, although that's not really going to happen this year, more than likely, thanks to the massive El Nino that we have out here in the Pacific. But bottom line, the eastern Atlantic is beginning to warm up. And again, it's happening as we head into August and as we are about to enter, into the door of the peak of hurricane season in the Atlantic. So that might make things a little bit interesting. Maybe it might help us, push back against some of these El Nino conditions a little bit. But in general, maybe, that would also help as well. Anything that does try to develop out here in the eastern MDR with whatever signal that might be appearing in the models as we head into August too. So something interesting as well to keep in mind. And then regular sea surface temperatures, especially off the southeast coast. The anomalies are very warm, and even with the regular sea surface temperatures as well, very warm pretty much throughout the entire southwestern Atlantic, and especially here off the coast of Florida, 30, even 31 degrees Celsius popping up consistently. And the Gulf too, we had Bertha, which took some, heat out of the ocean for a few days here after we had record warm sea surface temperatures beforehand. But ever since then, the Gulf has recovered quite a bit sea surface temperature wise, and we are once again back to seeing widespread 29, 30, even pockets of 31 Celsius once again developing in the Gulf. And that just goes to show the nature of how quickly the Gulf is able to warm up, especially now that we are in midsummer. So this is probably going to warm up even further, and would also be another area that we would need to watch for development, and maybe some interesting development if the chance does come. But overall, the Atlantic is warm, especially here in the southwestern Atlantic, and off Florida and even off the southeast coast here, 29, 30 degrees Celsius waters. So whatever does try to get going will definitely have sea surface temperatures in its favor. All right, with that being said, before we wrap it up, let's move on to the Eastern Pacific here. And this is what also makes things a little bit more interesting as well, because I mentioned this at the start of the video, but looking at the GFS here, taking it out over the next week, first of all, you see Genevieve, but that is going to continue to fade off over the next few days as it continues to move on off to the west-northwest, so no need to worry about that. But then beyond, and behind Genevieve, taking it out to a week's time here, now we are basically in the first full week of August. Nothing is appearing on the models here in the East Pac. Maybe, some small signal here that the GFS is showing moving into the Central Pacific, but nothing solid is appearing on the models. You don't have any sort of low pressure that tries to develop, and you don't see any sort of energy bundling with the vorticity. No solid signal appearing on the GFS. And this is very interesting because, as I said before, you would think in a year like this, with a very strong El Nino, especially heading into early August, we would really start seeing things ramp up in the Eastern Pacific even more. But we're not. And even taking it beyond 7 days, the most we have is maybe a small signal here, roughly around beyond 10 days out, that the GFS is showing, and that doesn't really look particularly that impressive. So the GFS, or the GFS is indicating maybe the Eastern Pacific might be, slipping into a little bit of a slumber here. So maybe if the Eastern Pacific isn't producing, that would allow potentially the chance for the Atlantic to come alive a little bit. And, well, we do have signals that the models are beginning to light up with for the first 2 weeks or so in the Atlantic. So what I'm saying is things are starting to get interesting, and we definitely have things on the table to watch for as we enter the month of August with the tropics in the Atlantic. But of course, nothing is set in stone just yet. There's still a little bit of uncertainty out there, and of course, most of these signals anyways are somewhat long range still, so we still have a lot of watching to do and watching to see whether or not things are actually able to come together. But the signals are there. The base is there for, the potential signs. And I think that's pretty much what we need, or the best thing we can kind of, look out for in this moment in time. And it is there. So again, we will be watching things very closely here over the next week. And it's, certainly safe to say that the tropics will definitely look interesting here in the Atlantic. With that being said, though, I'm going to wrap it up for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like this video, comment any thoughts or questions you have below. And if you want more videos like this, subscribe to the channel and make sure to turn on the notification bell as well if you do decide to subscribe. And I do have an announcement for all of you. Make sure to stay tuned tomorrow because I will be doing a live stream on YouTube. Not necessarily decided on what time yet tomorrow, but more than likely in the afternoon. Since it will be August 1st, again, we will be entering the month of August. We will be getting into the start of the meat and potatoes of the hurricane season as we typically do with August and September. I will be doing a special mid-season hurricane update where obviously we'll be taking a look at what is happening in the tropics, but that will include updated hurricane season forecasts and opinions from me. So if you want to stay tuned for that, and if you haven't already done so, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can get notifications on when I do go live tomorrow. But I will be going live, and I hope I see all of you guys there. So if you want to see me and if you want to catch my opinions on what I believe is still coming this hurricane season, make sure to stay tuned for tomorrow. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I'll be back with more once again tomorrow.